Welcome to Neetal Notes number 2, the 411 on Innov8social and this podcast. My name is Neetal. So there's some exciting news. The podcast has a new name. It is called The Impact Podcast by Innov8social. And there's a story behind the evolution of the podcast and the new name. So I would love to share that in this episode. So to tell some of the stories around this, we're going to have to flashback. We're going to have to jump back to 2011. And in 2011, I was finishing up a role in social media at a website that provided legal information. So in that role, I learned about blogging. I had never blogged before, but I learned and actually wrote hundreds of blog posts there, managed online communities, and oversaw the email marketing. So in coming with that new skill set, plus the legal lens, which was my education, and my passion for social impact, I started learning about a new legal structure that was being introduced in California at that time. And it was to create a for-profit company that had a social impact motivation. So it was something I was very interested in and was kind of a good fit for my interest and my next stage. So I said, how can I learn about this and get involved? And so I reached out to the organizers and spoke to them on the phone. And they mentioned that they had a hearing in Sacramento. So Sacramento is a few hours away from where I live. So they said, it's going to be streamed online and you can follow it and engage with us. So I got off the phone. I thought, okay, this is an actionable step I can take. I can follow this and maybe think about how I can, learn more about the space and engage in it. And my sister said, why don't you just go? Why don't you just go to the hearing? It's, if you're really passionate and interested about the space, there's nothing that will be more powerful than actually meeting people involved in the movement and understanding it better in that way. So I gave it some thought and I thought, yeah, I should go. So I got in the car and drove the few hours to Sacramento and sat in on a Senate committee on banking and finance. So that's when I learned about AB 361, which was the benefit corporation legislation, and also learned that there was another piece of legislation which now called the social purpose corporation. And so California at that time was the 6th state to look at benefit corporation legislation and the very first state to have 2 legal forms. So it was really interesting to kind of dive into and understand it better and to think that was a moment in time when there was some shift in consciousness happening, that you had policymakers, politicians, regular civilians, attorneys, consumers, all on the same page to take another look, a closer look at how we could formalize social entrepreneurship. So it was, it was a really exciting time, and a blog became a natural forum for me to share, capture, and engage in the space. So that's how Innov8social kind of came to be. And Innov8social, the name is kind of a riff off of social innovation. Social innovation is kind of a long title to have as the name of a website or something of that nature. So I thought, innovate, and I really like this innovate. It's kind of a call to action, Innov8social, and the 8 kind of gave it a quirky and fun, look, and made it memorable. So that was the start of Innov8social, and after that I followed the legislation to the California State Judiciary Committee hearing, past the Senate Appropriations Committee, to the Senate floor, back to the Assembly, and to the governor's desk, which was signed by Governor Jerry Brown. And so it kind of also showed me the number of steps it takes in order to pass legislation. And then thinking that the vision for benefit corporations was to have a form or, availability in multiple states. So just thinking that in each state, all of these steps have to happen was kind of incredible. And, I remember I think I was at a cafe before heading out to Sacramento for one of the next hearings. And I was thinking, and I just had this thought, I was like, is there some other way I can capture this kind of momentous time, that of what's happening. So I actually, using my phone, I thought, what's the leanest way I can do this? And it was through capturing video. I'll actually include some of the clips below. But my first interviews via video were with one of the co-authors of AB 361, Donald Simon. He's an attorney, and then State Assembly member Jared Huffman, who is now a congressman. So it was really, interesting to get their perspectives and to understand the process through their eyes, because they had both been on different sides of the process, but really immersed in it. So as the years went by and I started covering more events and articles, media, different resources in the social impact and social entrepreneurship space, I realized I loved the interviews. I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to someone, ask them questions, kind of hear their stories, and also begin to kind of map out in my mind where all of these points connect, where you have attorneys, consumers, social entrepreneurs, filmmakers, all thinking about impact. So as I was recording these interviews, I thought, I should share them in some way. So the very first, mode of sharing was just putting them online and having them available to listen. And, and as time went by, I realized I am a huge listener of audio podcasts, of audiobooks, and I thought, can we create a podcast out of this? So over the last year, I've worked with a sound designer and sound engineer, and coming up with an intro and outro, and, cleaning up some of the audio and making it accessible and interesting to share. So we have been doing that, and that's been really rewarding and amazing. The name for that was just kind of de facto Innov8social podcast, just as an extension of the blog. But in the last 6 months, as Innov8social has really come into its own and is starting to become a platform for people to engage in the social impact and social entrepreneurship space, it seemed like a good time right now. And after some of the busyness of the book and, creating some of the tools and the course, to look again at the podcast and to think, okay, is this name capturing, is there some other way we can capture the focus of the podcast, especially now that it's on some different forums where people may not be aware about the website itself. So I love the word impact, and I've loved this journey of exploring social impact. So the Impact Podcast became kind of a fun way to capture that. And so that's kind of leading us to today. Now, as we go forward, and as I've gotten some great feedback since my last Neetal Notes, and asked a few people for their opinions and thoughts on ways to make the podcast more impactful and engaging. One of the pieces of feedback I got from someone whom I respect and distinguished herself in the podcasting space said that, we don't hear enough of you on the podcast, and kind of getting your thoughts and reflections on a lot of these topics. So I kind of took that to heart and thought, okay, how can we retumble the format and the way that the podcast is presented to kind of highlight and bring forth the opportunities to engage in impact. So, you can look for some changes like that coming up. And I would love to engage with you more. So you can, of course, subscribe to the podcast, the Impact Podcast by Innov8social, on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. And you can also email us at podcast@innov8social.com. That's INNOV8social.com. And we're just, we're right now open to new topics to cover and ways to improve the podcast. What will make the topics that we can cover more engaging and make it easier for you to create social impact in your lives. Those are the kinds of things that we want to cover. So it's an exciting time, and I'm looking forward to engaging more ahead. But thanks for being part of this community and for encouraging every step along the way.